It's great to see so many familiar faces as well as new ones for our talk this afternoon. Can I just have a show of hand of those who are not M&S members? Okay, so majority are M&S members, so I don't need to explain what M&S is all about in that case. So this afternoon, our talk is slightly different to the usual ones because normally we cover plants and animals. So today we'll be covering fungi, which I am told does not fall under either one of those categories. Most of us are very familiar with mushrooms, type of actually something that pops up from a fungi. Right? Mushroom is the fruit that comes from fungi. So most of us are familiar with mushrooms when we go into the forest. They are beautiful to look at, beautiful to shoot. Mushrooms are also great to eat, to be eaten. I think in Malaysia especially, we also have a lot of people who are doing business to cultivate mushroom for the purpose of medication as well. So I'm not sure how effective they are, but the marketing of those companies are doing a great job to tell you that they can do all kind of wonders, including heal cancer. So that is yet to be known. But so I thought that we invite a distinguished speaker who specializes in macrofungi research to give us the talk today. So our speaker today is actually an over 20-year veteran of FRIM. Okay, so she's been there for a long time. She specializes in forest diseases research as well as fungi diversity. She is the head of forest research and conservation program. Correct me if I'm wrong. Of the Biodiversity division of FRIM, and she's also the first female vice president of IUFRO, the International Union of Forest Research Organization, which is a big organization consisting of over 600 forest research organizations all around the world. So without much further ado, let's give a big welcome to our speaker today, Dr. Lee.
Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you all for spending your afternoon to come and listen to this talk. I hope it will be interesting. I don't want to make it a very formal talk, so if you want to ask any questions anytime throughout the talk, please stop me and please go ahead. So today I want to tell you a little bit about Malaysian Macrofungal diversity. Now, what is macrofungi? I will come to that later. So this is the title of the talk anyway. So let's proceed. Okay, we all know that Malaysia is one of the most megadiverse countries in the world. We are considered one of the 17 top megadiverse countries. Last time they said 12, now it's 17. So Dr. Lilian was the one who corrected me. So and why did we say that? Well, we have more than 15,000 species of plants, I think all of you know this, and 286 species of mammals. So this is pretty well known. These figures have been widely quoted everywhere. But when you talk about the other groups, these are all estimates. Okay, so we think we have about 150,000 species of invertebrates. So these are all the insects and all the arthropods, about 1,000 species of butterflies, 12,000 species of moths, and when you say 12,000 species, a lot of this was because of the work of Jeremy Holloway. You've seen all the publications that he has produced in the Malaysian Nature Journal over the years, so this is all the work that has been accumulated over those years. And we think that we have more than 4,000 species of fish in the seas and in the oceans. Fungi, if you look at the Malaysian biodiversity report, they say we have 400 species of fungi. Well, now the research done in FRIM, we know that we have at least 4,000 species, probably a lot more. And this 4,000 species is only based on what we have accumulated from all the publications that have been published over the years. And probably there were some that we will miss out as well. So this 4,000 will increase if more work is done. So overall, even though we say we are one of the most mega-diverse countries in the world, we know very little about insects and fungi. We know that we have large numbers, but what are they, which species, what genera and so on, that one is still a lot of work needs to be done. So, to tell you a little bit about kingdom fungi. In the past, people always said fungi are plants. Even today, many people say, oh, fungi is plants, it's part of the plant kingdom. No, they're not part of the plant kingdom. They have their own kingdom, and their kingdom is called fungi. And this was only separated from the plant kingdom in 1969, maybe before some of you were born, So this is very recent, something very new. And how many species are there in the world? Well, there are many estimates, a lot of them estimates. Some people say it's 1 million, other researchers say 2 million. The latest publications think it's more like 5.1 million. So Meredith Maxwell, this lady, Meredith Blackwell, she has done a lot of work and she estimates the figure is closer to 5.1 million.
Doctor, if you can explain why it was separated from the plant kingdom?
They have very different, so you see here, so you will find out why, because they have many different characteristics from plants, right? So, first difference between plants and fungi, plants can photosynthesize. They have plastids that allows photosynthesis to take place. Fungi do not, right? They do not have plastids, so they cannot photosynthesize. They are eukaryotes like plants as well, right? But they cannot photosynthesize. And then their nutrition, they get their food through absorption. Plants make their own food. Fungi cannot make their own food. So they have to absorb their food either through enzymatic activity, through the breakdown of organic matter and so on, and then after that they absorb the food by osmosis and so on. And they're never phagotropic. That means they're not like animals that can go out, or like amoeba that can go out and take other animals and ingest them. They cannot do that. And they do not have an amoeboid or pseudopodial phase, right? They don't have an amoeboid pseudopodial phase, unlike animals. Some animals you have one phase, part of the life cycle, where you have an amoeboid stage. And the cell walls in fungi all contain chitin and beta-glucans. Plant cell walls contain cellulose. They do not have chitin. Totally different characteristic altogether. And fungi are made of filamentous unicellular hyphae.
Chitin is something insects share in common.
Yeah, insects have chitins in their exoskeleton. And the bodies of all the fungi are made up of hyphae. They are filamentous unicellular cells, and then they can become organized to form things like mushrooms and so on. Plants do not have hyphae. Plants are not filamentous hyphae. They are made of parenchyma cells, sclerenchyma, collenchyma, various kinds of different plant cells, so different. And the fungi, they can produce sexually or asexually, like plants also they can do that, right? So they have different systems of nutrition, different systems of how they make their food. They have different kinds of cell walls, they have different kinds of construction. So based on these characters, they were taken out of the plant kingdom. So these are what we call the true fungi. There are some other groups that in the past people said were fungi, but now they say they are more like animals. So they have been moved into the kingdom closer to the protozoa. So the classification is changing quite rapidly, and now with molecular techniques, even more changes are happening. Okay? So for the time being, at least it would be nice if people can remember that fungi have their own kingdom and that they are not plants. Right? Oh yeah, and they can either be saprophytic, they live on dead material, or they have a mutualistic relationship. That means they live together with another organism in a mutually beneficial system, or they can be parasites. They cause damage to their host organism. I'll tell you more about that. talking about where they live. Actually, the fungi are found everywhere, including Antarctica. You wouldn't think that they can live in Antarctica because of all the ice and the snow and the cold, but they can. They live in the soil underneath the soil or the ice and snow. So they can live everywhere. Everywhere you go, in the Arctic, Antarctic, in the deserts, up in high mountains, in all terrestrial habitats, and some of them are marine fungi as well. They can live in the sea. Some of them. So they can live. You can find fungi in the soil. Any soil, you will be able to find fungi. Even in deserts, on rocks as well. You don't think that rocks can have fungi, but there are. They live in the freshwater environment as well as marine environment. There are people who specialize in this. Of course, on plants, you can find them on all the parts of the plants, on the roots, on the leaves, on the stems, on the bark, flowers, fruits, seeds, any part of the plant, you name it, you will find them. And then we have this big group called endophytes. For a long time, people never thought about this group. Endophytes are fungi which live inside the plant cells. You can't see them. Even if you put under a microscope, you won't be able to see them. But under special conditions, when you culture them, you can find them. And these endophytes now, people are finding all kinds of uses for endophytes. They have many special properties that people never knew about. So many of these endophytes now are being exploited for new chemicals, new enzymes, and so on.
Would cordyceps be an example of endophyte?
No, cordyceps is not an endophyte. Cordyceps is a mutualist, parasitic fungus between that parasitizes and insects. And then you have the symbiotic associations such as mycorrhizas. Mycorrhizas are the symbiosis between fungi and plant roots. The plant will get the benefit of having the fungus there by better absorption of nutrients like phosphorus, nitrogen, water. By having mycorrhizas, some of these plants are also able to tolerate more toxic soils which have been poisoned by tin mining or leftover from mining activities. Lichen is a symbiotic association between algae and fungi. So the algae will need the fungus for some of the nutrition aspects, and the fungus in return gets shelter from the algae. And sorry, I forgot to mention, in the mycorrhizas, the fungus gets photosynthesis from the plant. So it's always two-way relationship. And also there are many fungi which live with termites, like the cendawan busuk that everybody likes to eat, the termite fungi that people collect for food. In that case, the certain species of termites, they cultivate the fungi in what they call fungus gardens. And when the termites leave the nest, they abandon the nest, and under the right rainfall conditions and so on, then the fungus will fruit. That's when you get your cendawan busuk. Otherwise, you will not get the mushroom to eat, because all the time the termites are cultivating the fungus for their own food. Right? There are certain beetles also that form symbiotic associations with fungi. For example, some of the ambrosia beetles, these little beetles that make holes in the timber, that's what we call pinhole borers. It's called ambrosia beetle, tiny little beetles. These beetles depend on the fungi for food. They bore into the wood and they carry the spores of the fungus with them, and then the fungus will grow inside the wood, and the larvae of these beetles, they feed on the hyphae which is growing inside the wood. They don't eat the wood, but they need the wood as the substrate for the fungus to grow so that they can breed and multiply. So those are some of the examples of symbiotic associations. I'll show you some pictures of those. And then of course the fungi can live on us. Sometimes you get, athlete's foot, right? You get infection of your toenails or your fingernails. That's all caused by fungi. People who get ringworm, that's also caused by fungi. And on animals as well, you see all this, like kucing kurap, or the anjing, all the bulu, jatuh, that's also because of fungus infection. And a lot of
panau also.
Yeah, panau also is fungus. And then like some AIDS patients, their immune system is compromised. There are fungi that can grow in the inner lining of your mouth, your mucous membranes. So fungi can live on many different substrates, right? They can live in your lungs, they can cause diseases like aspergillosis, where the aspergillus fungus lives in your lungs and then you get respiratory problems. So that's also caused by a fungus. And then they live on arthropods and invertebrates. Just now you asked about cordyceps. That's on these insects, right? There are some fungi which parasitize insects. We call them entomogenous fungi. They will only live on certain insects and they will kill the insect ultimately. So this is one of the agents that we can use for biocontrol for insects. So some of these fungi, these entomogenous fungi, they are very good biocontrol agents. And they also live in animal and insect guts. Some insects and some animals, for example cows. Cows have certain fungi in their rumen that helps them in the digestion of all the grass that they eat. Otherwise, they cannot digest the food themselves. Even though cows have 4 stomachs, they still need these fungi to help them digest the food. And there are some insects that have fungi in their guts which also help them digest the cellulose that they consume. So, etc., etc. There are many examples. If you go to the internet, you will find insects. I mean, these fungi, they are very versatile organisms. They can live on a huge range of substrates. So these are just some examples. So, I mentioned earlier that the fungi cannot make their own food. Right? So they generally get their food either as a saprotroph, that means they live on dead organic matter, so they break down litter, dead woody material, animal debris, and they do this by secreting enzymes such as xylanase, cellulase, hemicellulases, and a whole range of other enzymes which can break down all this material which then the fungus will absorb and use as their food. And by so doing, they also play a very important role in our ecosystem, because without the fungi, then all the litter that accumulates in the forest will just stay there. Right? You have all these piles of wood and leaves, and they'll just sit there, and you will have no nutrient cycling, and all this material. What's going to happen? Just insects alone is not enough. You need the fungi there as well. Then the other way that the fungi can get their food is, by being a necrotroph. So that means they kill some of the host cells. So example, when they cause diseases in plants and animals, or they can also be parasitizing other fungi, or they can parasitize insects. Right? So that means they kill the host organism, and by so doing, they also absorb the nutrients that are released. And the third way where they can get their food is by being a symbiotic organism or a biotroph. So this I mentioned earlier, so I will show you some pictures of some of these associations. First, saprotroph. So I think when you go to the forest, you always see this fungus, microforums and tombers. This one always lives on dead branches, so it kind of specializes on dead branches. So when it does so, actually it is secreting enzymes that breaks down the cellulose and the lignin in the wood, and then it's absorbing those nutrients. And in the same process, also it's breaking this into smaller pieces, it rots away, then gets recycled. And then I'm sure many of you are familiar with this Cantarella, or people call chytrids in Chinese. The one that you get in your, sometimes in your lejikan, the crunchy fungus. This is a fungus. It grows like this. You can find it sometimes when you go into the forest. So this is also lives on dead wood or dead timber. And then you have fungi like this one growing on elephant dung. So these are just very young mushrooms which are just coming out, right? And the elephant dung is, when you look at elephant dung, is mainly composed of a lot of fibers because the elephants eat a lot of grass and organic vegetation. And so you need the fungi to help break this down to recycle it back. And so these are some of the fungi which are found on things like empty fruit bunches that are left in the forest, in your oil palm plantation. You look, next time you go to oil palm plantation, you see all this empty fruit bunch. You look at the old ones, you will usually find some fungi there. They are in the process of breaking down this organic matter.
Coming back to the elephants,
yeah.
Is the fungi necessary for the digestion just like cows?
Not in elephant. Nobody has looked at fungi in elephant guts.
So also be interesting to trace the life cycle, in the garden.
Yeah, these fungi that we have found on elephant dung, these are saprophytes, which are commonly found in the normal environment. And then, of course, you go in the forest, you see lots of little fungi that grow on leaves. They're all doing something. They're all breaking down all this material for food. Okay. So necrotrophs. Okay. So necrotrophs, remember I said they kill some tissue and then they get their nutrition from there. So for example, this one is the fungus Cantarella and anisoplay, which is parasitic here on termites. So you see the termite is not totally covered by the spores of the fungus. And this is on the mealworm, this is the cacing that people use for fishing, right? So this was an experiment that we did. You find the fungus is growing all over this mealworm. So they kill this thing. So now a lot of this metarhizium is being used and marketed as a biocontrol agent for insect pests. In Malaysia, maybe not yet available commercially, but I know in Vietnam you can buy a packet of metarhizium fungi, which you can spray like you spray insecticide, but it's made of fungus spores. And then you have fungi which are parasites on trees, like for example, this is a rust fungus, Euromycadium. So it doesn't kill the tree, but it deforms the shoots and the young seed pods, so the tree cannot grow properly. But in the process, of course, the fungus is getting its food now. Right? And then you were asking about cordyceps. So Chinese like to use cordyceps for all kinds of medicine and so on. Actually, cordyceps is a fungus which has parasitized an insect, the larva of an insect. So actually, if you look very carefully, next time you buy cordyceps, you look very carefully, actually, you will still be able to see parts of the...
Actually, when I first saw cordyceps, the sensei shop, I thought was a type of larvae. I didn't realize it was a fungus eating the larvae from the inside.
Yeah, so what happens is that the insect lays its egg there, and then it grows, the fungus grows into the insect. Like for example, in this case, this ant, this is another species of cordyceps. There are many species of cordyceps. The one that we use for medicine is called Cordyceps sinensis, meaning from China. This is another species of cordyceps. This is the big forest ant that you see, the camphor lotus. So what happens is that this fungus, the spores will enter the insect. The insects have spiracles, right? Little holes that the insect uses to breathe. So the spores go inside there. They germinate inside the insect, or sometimes it germinates inside there, and then it slowly spreads inside the insect. The hyphae will be spreading inside the insect, and at the same time, it means the hyphae is absorbing nutrients from the insect. The insect is not dead yet, right? So slowly, this fungus will grow until it infects the brain of the insect. Insects have brains, don't think insects don't have brains. Like insects also have brains. So it will infect the brain of the insect, and it will modify the behavior of the insect such that this insect will then go up to a branch, and then it's got the mandibles, the teeth, will clamp onto the branch to make sure the insect stays there. Why? So that the fungus can release its spores. So when it clamps the teeth, the mandibles onto the branch like here, then after that the insect dies. And when the insect dies, then the fungus will grow out of the insect. And on this surface is where all the spores are. So by sitting here, then the wind that comes along will bring all these spores, spread the spores all over. So actually this fungus is very ingenious.
Like alien.
Like an alien, exactly.
How do they make the ant to fight?
Somehow it changes the brain patterns of the ants, I don't know how, but it does something. The chemistry of the insect's brain is changed so that it will go up to a branch, it will seek a branch, and then it will just clamp on there, and then it will die there. When it dies, then the fungus will grow out. So exactly like alien. So this is one way that this fungus behaves. In the case of cordyceps, it's different. Cordyceps, this one is buried in the ground. Right, so the larva of the insect is in the ground, the fungus grows onto the larva, and then after the larva dies, this part of the fungus will come out of the ground, above the soil, and people will go and collect it. Right? So there are many species of cordyceps, and there are many scientists who are studying this because it's a very fascinating field of study. You see this kind of relationship going on.
Why do Chinese medicine use cordyceps? What's the benefit?
I don't know. You ask the Chinese, you'll say maybe because in the Chinese medicine they found many years ago that there are certain benefits for this particular fungus. Actually, there are many fungi which are used in medicine. I will tell you a little bit about them later on. But over the years, the Chinese, since then they have been studying this for a long time. That they know that it has some benefit for certain diseases. I'm not sure what cordyceps is used for. People who use that, they'll probably know. I don't use it myself, so I'm not sure.
Ask your local Sinsei.
Yeah, you go to the Sinsei, I'm sure he can tell you, this is good for this or that. But it's very expensive, it's not cheap. Because it's very hard to collect. It's very difficult to collect this fungus because it's one and it cannot be cultivated. If you can cultivate it, then of course, you can make a lot of money. But it's very hard. Nobody has been able to cultivate it successfully. And then the third mode of nutrition is as a symbiont or biotroph. So I think all of you are familiar with this oyster mushroom. Many of you like to eat it as well, I think. But did you know that oyster mushrooms have a very interesting relationship with nematodes? The nematodes are little worms that attack roots of trees, also shoots of plants. They can cause deformation and so on. These oyster mushrooms, hyphae, have a special structure where they can trap nematodes. And they trap the nematode and kill the nematode and use it for food. So very, they can live also on organic matter, but they have this very special relationship with nematodes as well. It traps the animal. Yeah, the filaments of the the hyphae of the fungus, like almost like an animal where you can go and trap something, but it's a special structure. So the nematode sort of like swims around, and then gets stuck in the hyphae and gets trapped there, and the fungus will kill it. And then we don't have these ants, leaf-cutting ants. In South America, you have these leaf-cutting ants. It's quite fascinating to see them. They have a long line of ants carrying these little leaves. I think you've seen cartoons of them anyway, And they take these leaves down to their nest. It's a huge nest which is underground. And these leaves, by themselves, they cannot be digested or degraded. So they cultivate this fungus in the family Lepiotaceae, which grows on these leaves and digests and breaks down the leaves so that the ants can use it as their source of food. So very interesting system there as well. And then we have the ectomycorrhizas, I said. So this is a root of a dipterocarp which has been, in a way you can say, infected by the fungus. So the roots now become much fatter. You have all this hyphae, the mycelium growing out there. The branching pattern becomes much more complex. And the roots, if you look at cross-section, is modified. So now the epidermis now becomes longitudinally elongated. So the surface area of the root is much more expanded, and then the fungus will be able to absorb more water, phosphorus, and the plant in return gives photosynthate to the fungus, so they both benefit. And then the termites, there are many species of these termite mushrooms, Termitomyces, where termites cultivate them for their food, and which we also use as food. And we have this ambrosia beetles with this fungus ceratocystis. So if you see this kind of holes, the little black holes, this is where the fungus, the insect first made a hole in the wood, and then you have this what you call channels or galleries. And these galleries are black in color because the fungus is growing there, right? So in these galleries, the hyphae will be there, and then the insect larvae will be running around these galleries, mowing the hyphae, eating the hyphae. Right? So this one then, when you get this kind of infection, of course the value of your timber is decreased. When you try to sell your timber, people don't want to buy your wood because got all this lobang and then got all this, black jalo inside there. So the value is much.
In the case of the leaf-cutting ants,
yeah.
Are the ants eating the digested leaves or the fungi?
The digested leaves, not the fungi. The fungi are the ones that are breaking down the leaves.
How do we find the fungi to cultivate?
Sorry? Sorry?
How do we find the fungi to cultivate and
the ants the fungi are found all over the place in the ground and so on, but I don't know how. I'm not an ant, so I don't know how they do it.
Maybe they just stop like make yogurt.
Well, in the old colony there will be some already, so they will take it along with them when they start a new colony. But how the first one came about, I don't know. Maybe over the years, over the millennia, there's some evolutionary process where the fungus has evolved together with the ant.
These embryosa beetles, they produce these channels, right?
The larvae.
Yeah. Do these channels affect the structural integrity of the wood, or they're just very minor?
It depends on how deep they go. So different ambrosia beetles make different kinds of galleries. You can tell, some good entomologists, they can tell which ambrosia beetle is there by the pattern of the galleries. So it does affect the strength quality of the timber. Okay, so how do fungi reproduce? They basically reproduce either by producing spores, which are then dispersed by wind, water, animals, humans, and so on, or by mycelium, right? So spores will be you have asexual and sexual spores, and then mycelium is vegetative propagation. So they have this, remember I said the fungi are made up of all these filaments of hyphae, so this one can spread in the soil, in the debris, and so on. So these are two main means of dispersal and reproduction. Okay, so now we come to the main part of the talk. That was more like to tell you a little bit of fungi.
Yeah, I read somewhere that mycelium can be as big as like a very huge area.
Here you don't see, if you've been to, or maybe you've seen in books, or if you've been to some temperate countries, you see what they call fairy rings, right? The fairy ring expands every year, right? Because the mycelium is going outwards every year. So every year when the mushrooms pop up, they're coming further and further apart. So I think the biggest one is something like 200 hectares or something in the UK, where they have been following this fungus every year. It's a polypore, I think. So they first noticed where it was, and then every year, each time it spreads, it fruits, it comes out further.
How deep is it underground?
I don't know how deep that one is, but usually fungi don't go very much deeper than the first 30 centimeters of the soil, because they are mainly aerobic organisms. They need air. So if it's too deep, then it's anaerobic. So mostly fungi are in the top 30 centimeters of the soil, not very deep.
Do they expel carbon dioxide?
Yes, they respire. Yeah. That's why when people talk about climate change, every time people are talking about the trees, they forget about all the soil microorganisms, the fungi, the nematodes, the collembola, the insects. They all breathe too, and they also all expire carbon dioxide. So that is a huge pool of carbon dioxide that's being let out by all these microorganisms that nobody is looking at. So they do.
So this fungi growing underground, is it a single organism or?
It can be a single, if it's let's say one particular species, it's one single organism, but they do have, if they have sexual reproduction, then it's more than one. So because they have cross fertilization.
So it can be said it's the largest organism as well?
Depends, some of them are restricted in their how far they grow, others can grow very far.
You said a few hectares, right?
This one particular fungus is the biggest one.
Most of the mycelium is very small, right?
The mycelium is all microscopic, right? But the extents can be very wide, or it can be very specialized. Like some of those very specialized ones, they're only restricted to a very small area. But like some of these saprophytes or the saprotrophs, they can expand very far.
If the spore expired, let's say you keep it and then for a long time, and then you put it out again, will it grow again?
Depends on some fungi. Some fungi, they can produce dormant spores, or they can produce sclerotia. Those can last for a very, very long time. But
Very long time means like
many years.
hundreds of years.
Sometimes, I don't know about hundreds of years. I don't know about hundreds of years, but definitely can be for quite a long time. But mycelium, usually after a while, when they dry up, then they die. Right? But
What would be interesting is this plant turn out. So this fungi would be already exist like way before plants.
The problem with fungi is that normally people look at fossils, and fossils of fungi are very hard to find. Yeah, so we don't know how. I mean, probably I'm not sure how who's older. There's some argument about that because the main problem is you cannot find the fossils of the fungi to prove that they were there before the plants.
Will you go through more of the reproduction of fungi, or
No.
how do they do this? I mean, you say that
It depends on which
how
family.
they fertilize,
It depends on which family. Each family has a different. If it's the ascomycetes, they have a different life cycle. The reproduction is different. If it's the basidiomycetes, it's different. If it's the imperfect fungi, it's different. So that is a university course that I used to teach. It's at least one semester.
Long story takes 3 months.
Because there's so many different groups, and each group is different.
How about our most common animals? How are those?
Those, a lot of them are propagated vegetatively. They use vegetative propagation, asexually. Yeah. But they do have. Yes, they do reproduce sexually.
How's that? Not through the spores, of course. Right?
By spores, through the basidiospores. So
different set of spores.
No, they are spores. They're all spores. They're different depending on which group of fungi. Then the names are different again, right? So it's very technical. So like the basidiomycetes, the ones that we eat, most of them, they are the basidiomycetes. They have 4 spores called basidiospores, which are produced on the basidium, and during sexual reproduction, the spores will cross-fertilize with each other. Then they go through meiosis and mitosis and so on, and then you get a new organism. Right? So if you're interested in the reproduction, I think you can find a lot of information on the internet as well, depending on which group again. Each group is different. Right? So now we come to this thing about mushrooms and toadstools. People always think, mushrooms are edible, toadstools are poisonous. You think so?
Not so simplistic.
I also hear, I've heard in the past some general rule of thumb to tell whether a mushroom is poisonous or not. Like one is that, if they're on the ground, they are not poisonous. If they're on the branches, they are poisonous. Well, yeah, it's general.
If you go like that, I think a lot of people will be dead.
That's general rule.
There isn't any. The only general rule of thumb when it comes to telling whether a mushroom can be eaten or not is how well you know your mushrooms, whether you can identify them correctly. If you identify them, make a wrong identification, the chances of poisoning are very, very high. So, very often when you hear in Australia, you have a lot of migrants that come from Italy or from Greece or from the Eastern European countries.
They recognize.
Yes, because they used to collect mushrooms back home when they were, and they think, this mushroom looks like the one I used to collect at home. Take, go home, makan, next thing, mabuk or masuk hospital. Because it looks the same, but it's not the same, So that's why it's very dangerous.
Also, mushrooms are strange. Some of them are poisonous when they're raw, but if you cook them, they're not poisonous.
Yes.
There was a celebrated case in France where this lady murdered her husband using mushrooms, but she didn't know that the mushrooms is not poisonous. So after he ate the mushroom, he said, I just killed you. But then he didn't die, so.
Yeah, and then some people, to me, I can eat the mushroom, I'm fine. But you might eat the mushroom and you can get sick. There are certain kinds of individual reactions to mushrooms as well. So people say mushrooms can be eaten, toadstools cannot. No, not true. So this term mushrooms and toadstools is just a very general term that people have used for a long time just to describe the mushrooms that you see, the ones that you pick in the forest and so on. Any fleshy fruiting body with a cap and a stem, people say, oh, this is a mushroom or this is a toadstool. And to think that why they call toadstool because toads sit on them, not true also. Some people say, toads sit on them, so they're called toadstools. No, this is all these old wives' tales. There's no such thing. So we said this, we've already done with that. So and then this term fungus and fungi. Why people say fungus? Why people say fungi? Why mushroom? So fungus is singular, fungi is plural. That is the technical term. To the layman, it's much easier to say mushrooms and toadstools. Actually, they're the same thing, right? Now we come to this macrofungi. Macro, means big lah, So macrofungi or the larger fungi are those that you can see with your naked eye. Because there are very, very many fungi which are microscopic that you don't see. Only under the microscope you can see them. Or when they grow on your bread, then you see, your bread turn green or black. Those are the microfungi. right? Those you can only see the structure when you look under the microscope. So these macrofungi, things like puffballs.
Are there puffballs in there?
Yes, yes. Toadstools, or the brackets, stinkhorns, so on. All these are what we call macrofungi. And then we have this term mycota. What does mycota mean? Mycota just means all the fungi of a particular area. So I can say the mycota of shrimp, it means all the fungi found in shrimp. Or I say the mycota of lake gardens, it means all the fungi which have been ever described from lake gardens. That's mycota. So we had a big project which was funded under, I was telling Ilyas just now, under the 9th Malaysia plan, where we were going around the country doing an inventory. We were trying to identify all the different kinds of fungi that we can find in different kinds of forest types in peninsular Malaysia. So all the green spots are where we did our sampling. So you can see we couldn't cover the whole country. Even then, this is what we, because we didn't have enough people, we didn't have manpower, and then the mushrooms are not there all the time. Sometimes you go, there's nothing there. Sometimes you go, you have very good collections.
Just kindly go back once.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
I think we'll put the slides on the MNS website later on.
Oh,
that's what I was told. So, during this project, we went monthly to Fraser's Hill. There's a little red spot here. So we have much better data for Fraser's Hill, right? And so if you look at the Fraser's Hill, we were collecting there every month for 2007, 2008, and 2009. And you see actually there's no pattern, right? So people say, oh, mushroom season, when's the mushroom season? When's the best time to collect mushrooms? So all I can say is the best time to collect mushrooms is after a long dry spell when the rains start. That's usually when you get a lot of mushrooms. So now very hard to predict when's the rainy season, when's the dry season.
That's why we should say like mushrooms after.
Yeah. That's why. So if you're living in the temperate countries, then it's easy. Spring, very good. Autumn, very good, because that's when the rains come. Then you have a huge flush of mushrooms.
So by collection, do you mean photographing and then taking a sample, but then it's very difficult to preserve, isn't it? The structure.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to even see what the underlying structure is.
You have to do it microscopically.
Yeah,
you have to do it microscopically. That's why I want to tell you all here now, and I hope you will also pass the message on to your friends that by looking at the photograph, it is very, very difficult to identify a mushroom. Very often people show me a photograph. Can you please tell me what mushroom this is? It's not so easy. The photograph, unless I'm really familiar with the mushroom, I've seen it day in and day out for many years, and I'm very confident that I can tell you. A lot of the times, you look at the mushroom in the photograph, it looks like this, it could be that, but to know for sure, you need to look at it under the microscope. You need to look at the spores.
Even then, how scientifically or do you need to do a DNA?
Now people use DNA, but even with DNA, you go to the database like GenBank, a lot of tropical fungi are not there. So you can say, it's close to this group or close to that group, maybe in this genus or that genus. So even after looking at it microscopically, you still need to have keys to identify them, and a lot of the tropical fungi, no description. So very often we can only get down to the genus level, we cannot get down to the species level. Right, so you need a lot of work to be done taxonomically, but unfortunately we don't have the people or the money to do that. So a lot of them will always remain Boletus species, Rusula species, Agaricus species. You can't go beyond that. So you want to collect mushrooms, very difficult to predict when. So all I can say is after a long dry season, when you rain, then you have a good chance of finding.
Biologically, why does the rain actually?
It acts as it's like a stimulus, like a lot of trees as well. You have a long dry season, when the rains come, then you get flowering. It's a stimulus that sets off the process. Okay, so now maybe this will be more interesting for many of you. These are some of the very common polypores that you see when you go into the forest. This one, I think very common, you can find everywhere. This bright orange one, you see on dead wood. This one, of course, I think this is like the most common fungus you can find everywhere.
That one also known as 3K or something.
3K?
Yes. Apparently it's supposed to be like the female version
figure out what are the 3 Ks. Stand for.
My colleague there, Vicky, she's working on that fungus now. You want to know more, she can tell you. So
why polypores?
Polypores because they have many pores on the underside. That's the name that has been used. So if you look, now of course you can't see. Next time when you go out to the field, bring a little magnifying glass with you. You look on the underside, this one you'll find tiny, tiny little holes, very small ones. So this one is called microporous because the pores are very small. Micro, right, porous. This one porous because it's red in color, so the porous means pores actually. Sanguineous means red. Yeah. So this microporous, there are several species, but this one, Sterium, is smooth on the underside. There are no pores at all. Even under the microscope, you find that no pores at all. It's smooth. Right? This is Ariella scabrosa, very easy to recognize because it's reddish here and then it has a white margin like that. And then of course you have all these ganodermas, all these big woody brackets, So this is very common, Ganoderma australe. And these are less common, not so easy to find, or not so easily don't fruit so often. This is very pretty. This one is pale. The color doesn't come out so well. It's pale pinkish purple, and the top part is black. Very very pretty one. So these are some of the ones that you find in our forest. And then this fungus was collected by Professor Connor in 1964, but all his specimens were either lost or in very poor condition, so there is no type specimen. So if you talk about botany and in taxonomy, you need a type specimen. A type specimen is the first specimen that was ever collected and then described, date given, right? So in the case of this fungus, the type specimen, if let's say now you want to go back and see the original first specimen that was collected, it's not available because it's lost, it's gone.
Disintegrated.
Yeah, very often beetles attack them, and they're eaten up and all become powder, gone. So the type specimen is missing. So one of my colleagues went to Endarompin in 2003 and he found it. But that time we didn't know very much about all these fungi. So we thought, oh yeah, another interesting mushroom. But then in 2009, Professor Horak came along with us to Endarompin, and then he was the one who told us, that this type collection is lost. It's a very important find that we should now describe this again. Right? So we have not yet published this paper, but we hope to do so. So this is one of the very interesting fungi called Longicollis because it's got a very long stem, right? And it's very slimy in the top. And we have several species of Hemioncorus. See how big it is? Right? It can grow bigger than this. This is not the biggest yet. But we also know very little about them. We don't know the names of all the species because very little work has been done.
Edible?
No, not edible. That's the problem, Malaysians are first thing you should So these are many new species that have never been described. They need to be worked on taxonomically. This one, all these we found in Endarompin. Endarompin is fantastic for mushrooms if you go in the right season. This time when we went, it was all over the place. Everywhere you look, you had to walk carefully to make sure you didn't step on them. There's so many. So these are some very interesting ones that have never been described before. So just now I said about 4,000. So if you add some more, all these, the numbers go up. This one is interesting. The stem is covered by this like a netting kind of structure. It's very, very pretty as well. And then Cortinariaceae, people said, there are no Cortinarians in the tropics. This is a fungus only found in temperate areas. Tropical areas, no Cortinariaceae. Well, they were wrong. When we started looking, we found like this new species, Phaeocolybia. This is Anamica. And this is a new species which has not yet been described. There are quite a few, and there are some Cortinarias as well. Cortinarias, they say, is a temperate genus. Now we find we have them here as well. And some new interesting species, we don't even know the name, so we don't even know what it is. It's a huge polypore, we don't know what it is. This is a little agaricus that grows, it's like agaricus, but it's not. It grows on termite mounds. Small, very small, maybe The cap is about 2 cm across only. This is a Palmero lepiota. It's a lepiota, but it's got this powder on the surface, so it's why I call it Palmero. Never did been described. This Phylophorus also grows on termite mounds, very small. This Hebeloma is very interesting. It's got a very long stem, and the stem is rooted deep in the ground, and usually it grows from the toilets of insects, animals, right? The animals' toilet, where all the droppings, this is from where the fungus grows out. So it's a very strange relationship there. And then we have this little Calostoma. This one is soft and jelly-like. It's got a little pink mouth. So all these are new species, not yet described. We only know the genus, that's all. And then this fungus, I had a project with some scientists from the UK in 1995. We found it in Paso, first collected and described in 1995, which is not so long ago. And after we found the first one, everywhere we went, next time we saw this thing again. Why is it before we did see it, we also don't know. Maybe because it was so inconspicuous, we were not aware that it was a fungus. Maybe you thought it's just some rotting vegetation or something like that, So, unfortunately, we don't have the taxonomic expertise in Malaysia, so very often all these descriptions can only come about when we collaborate with the scientists overseas. This one, Spongiforma square pensii. It's a new fungus described as, the cartoon SpongeBob SquarePants? Yeah, it's named after that. So, Professor Horak was very angry when he saw this name. He said these Americans have no sense of taxonomy. They don't know what they're talking about. How can they name a fungus after a cartoon character? No meaning, he said. Because in the past, all these fungi, they have a name, they have a meaning. Long stem or black cat or something, So now it's called. So, Spongiforma square pensii was described from Lambert Hills in Sarawak by an American scientist who was working there. And then one of my colleagues collected this in Terengganu. It looks like a sponge, right? So we're not sure whether it's square pensii. So now we are doing some DNA work to compare this with the square pensii which was described. So then hopefully we will be able to confirm the identity of this fungus. There's another closely related species in Thailand. So at first they said, it's only found in Thailand and in Sarawak. So it doesn't make sense. If it's found in Thailand and Sarawak, surely it must be in Peninsula as well, And we found it, right?
We found it.
Can you remember, Bikin? I can't remember which one. Gunung something or other. There was an expedition that was organized. I can't remember. I'm not sure whether it's Mandi Angin or not. Jerangau area, I think. Jerangau area. Okay, now come to one that everybody's very interested, edible ones. Right?
Now you're talking.
So, Termitomyces, all the species of Termitomyces are edible. This one, Microcarpus, because it's got a very small cap, right? Micro.
Is this the one we eat with pucuk paku pasal lemak?
I don't know. I don't know whether it's a
grow on rubber trees.
No. That's different. This one grows on the ground. This one grows with termites. And the orang asli call this cendawan bintang because it looks like bintang, like stars on the ground. Very small, but so high, cap maybe about 2 to 3 centimeters only. Very small, but grows a lot when it comes out. So according to the orang asli, says it's very delicious. I haven't tried it myself. This one, Hygrossaby, we are not sure what species. This one usually grows in the ladang after they clear and burn the ladang before they plant their paddy huma. So they always collect this. This is Nantinus Sayokaju. Edible when it's young, when it's old, it becomes very tough and woody. Right? So this one, the orang kampung and especially in Sarawak, they like this a lot. They collect this from. Grows on dead trees. Another species of Termitomyces. This is the one we talk about. Yang masak with pucuk paku one. This one. Cendawan sisir. Yeah. When it's dry, then it becomes very hard and dry. So I think you have to shred it and boil it before you can.
The termite mushroom is the one very sweet one.
Yeah. This one Chinese call gayoku, because it tastes like chicken meat. And then this one, the orang asli, they call cendawan merbau. because it grows with herbal trees. Because it's ectomycorrhizal, it grows with insea.
Is the kind of fungus also known in Malay as tahun? Tahun is that the same?
Cendawan tahun is a very general name. We found out it refers to itself, a number of species of cendawan tahun. And Cantarellas, we have many species of Cantarellas here that people don't even know about. Overseas, people talk about Cantarella siberius, one of the most favorite mushrooms. Smells like apricots. You can buy it in autumn. You can find it in markets in US, in Finland, Norway, Sweden, Europe. Very highly priced. But we have many other species of Cantarellas, also all edible, and we have tried it ourselves. Because one of my collaborators came and said, "Hey, you have Cantarellas here." So I asked him, like, is it edible? So I said, yes. So we collected a lot, and then I made a pie, and we ate. So I'm still here today. So that was okay. Then this one, this is the paddy straw mushroom. A lot of people call it now cendawan sawit because it grows on the oil palm farms. So you can find this in the markets in Bintulu, in Kuching, very, very popular. And then the juice here, the Chinese, the mogi, auricularia or Telingan Kera. So this one also cultivated now, but this is being sold in the market.
Oh, sometimes they call Telingan tikus, right?
Yeah. So in the same group of fungi.
Jelly a bit, right?
Yes, it's a jelly fungus, some people call it. And then this, in Sarawak, they call this cendawan putih. It's a lanthinus species, grows on dead wood, also very popular. But you must collect it when it's young, and when it's old, then it becomes very fibrous and hard. And then the medicinal fungi. These fungi, a lot of them are used by the orang asli for various medical conditions. Whether they really work or not, we have no proof. This one is what they say that they're using it for, but nobody's really studied them in any great detail to find out what is the actual compound that is conferring these medical properties and whether it really works or not. So this one, the common name is dead man's fingers, right? They all stick out like this. You find it in the forest, club shape. And if you break the inside, it's got some liquid inside. So the orang asli said the liquid inside they can give it to the babies and stops bed wetting. I don't know. They say this one, this Pingopolis, very common. They say they soak it in hot water and then they use it to wash their eyes. They use it to treat sore eyes. So maybe somebody should look at it. This is the one you were talking about, the 3K guy.
Yeah, but this is the opposite. This one is saying it's immunocontrol.
Yeah.
Yeah, about the K lah.
That's why it says,
I don't know how it's supposed to be aphrodisiac. For female.
I don't know. But and then this very common one that you go to the forest, you always find the little cups, the orange cups. Some of the orang asli just collect it and fry it up as food, just buat sayur lah, they say. But they also said, some people say it can be used for stomachache and for curing asthma.
But now about the time.
Sorry?
Maybe production has stimulated
And then this one, cendawan susu rimau, now very popular. Everybody says, oh, this one very important, can cure this, cure that, because Dr. Mahathir said you use it to cure his cough. So now everybody says, yeah, very good. But if you ask the orang asli, the orang asli actually never used it for medicinal purposes. They use it, they put it in their beras to ensure a good harvest the next season. Or if during times of starvation, no food, then they will eat a little bit of this part, this sclerotium, to keep them full. Right? But now people say got medicinal properties.
This is weight loss regime lah.
But now there are some commercial companies that are cultivating this one and marketing it for various medicinal purposes lah. I don't know whether proven or not proven lah. And then some more, this one I went collecting with this Tok Batin in one kampung, and he says they use it for lower back pain. He didn't have a local name, but when I looked it up in the book, this was the name I found. So he said they makan to sakit pinggang. This Felinus, they say it can be used as an anti-malarial. I'm not sure how they use it, but I know that they also burn it to keep mosquitoes away. Right? So they burn this, it emits a lot of smoke, so it keeps the mosquitoes out. And then this Amaloderma, this is very common. You go in the forest, you always see this black. The Ora asli, the stem of this mushroom is hollow. So they make it like a necklace, let the baby wear, and then they say it will stop the baby from crying continuously. How it works, I'm not sure. What's the principle, I'm not sure. And then this one, this is what we call cramp balls. Looks like a ball with that reddish brown wood. And they pound it up, use the powder and put it on your luka yang that servo on your foot, and it's supposed to dry up the wood. But fungi are also used in modern medicine. Those I don't know lah. We need to carry a lot more studies to confirm those claims. So just some examples. I think all of you know penicillin came from a fungus. Alexander Fleming discovered this. There are also others which are used for cancer treatment. Example, cyclosporin, that comes from a fungus as well. There are also some drugs like ergosterol, which comes from the ergot of rye, which is used in childbirth. So there are other examples as well. So if you're interested in this, you go to Wikipedia or something. I'm sure you can find lots more information. Many examples. So tropical fungi, according to what I know, they have the highest diversity among compared to say temperate areas and so on. And how people come up with these figures? Remember early on I said people say maybe 1 million or 2 million or 5 million. How do people come up with these figures when they have not yet discovered this fungi? So there is based on historical records, we find that usually one plant can be associated with 6 fungi, right? But now people find that more recent studies have shown that one plant can host up to 10.6 fungi. There are even some studies that say one plant can host 30 fungi. Now when you look at endophytes, the numbers go up incredibly. So at the discovery rate of 1,200 species per year, it will take at least 1,200 years to describe 1.4 million fungi. So if the numbers are 5.1 million, it will take another 4,000 years, long after all of us are gone. So it looks like it's a never-ending kind of thing, isn't it? So now people are more and more looking using DNA techniques, pyrosequencing, to try to come up with more accurate estimates of fungi. But very often you will have a DNA sequence, but you may not have a name, right? But you know it's a fungus. So they will give a code to the fungus. So no more of this nice macrofungi with the picture and the name and so on. It will just be maybe a DNA code. So we recently published this checklist of fungi in Malaysia. The first checklist of fungi in Malaysia was published in 1921. In that one there were about 800 species described. And then when we had this project in FRIM, I employed a couple of contract officers and we worked on this. Now we have documented about 4,000 species in this group, right? Based on things which were published. So not just macro fungi, this is all fungi, including the micro. But we know that this is not the whole story. A lot more to be there. Right? And if you are interested in the fungi, you can probably get this book from the FRIM bookshop later on. Not yet, it's just been published. This book also comes with a CD. Okay, so basically what we need is a lot more research, inventories, and with the new technologies like pyrosequencing, we hope that we can try to describe more fungi. But as I said, they may not have a name, they may just be a DNA sequence. Okay, so that's about it. I think so. These are some of the mushrooms that we have collected before. You can see some of them are really beautiful. This one is one of the coral fungi, Ramaria. This one is very pretty, blue color, Entoloma, the common rusula. These are the puff balls. You were asking just now whether they're puff balls. This is a puff ball. This is a mushroom which is buried in the ground. You normally will not see this unless some some animal has been scratching around. Then you might find this. This is about the size of a golf ball. By the way, this one is called Horaciella, named after Professor Horak. And they have usually a very strong smell. That's why the animals can find them. But sometimes humans, you may not smell it. So, like why people use dogs and pigs to look for truffles. That's because they have a very keen sense of smell. And these fungi all produce this smell which attracts these animals. So this is in that group of fungi. Okay? This is the another species of Cantarella, which looks like Stevarius, but it isn't. Another different species. Okay, so yeah, that's it. That's it.
So we open the next few minutes for questions. Any questions you'd like to pose?
Chinese they call the lingji. Yeah. Last time my friend told me if you want to look for lingji, you will see among the bamboos, when you go trekking the forest. Is that true? Sometimes you can see lingji growing among the bamboos. Is that a fungi or?
Lingji is a fungus, it's a ganoderma.
Yeah, but is that really, it's really true that if you want to look lingji,
No. Actually, what they call the real lingji is a temperate species, not found in Malaysia. The one that they're growing in, they're growing commercially in Malaysia, all imported from Taiwan or China, and then sometimes they mix with other species of Ganoderma tornatum and other species to bulk up their production. It doesn't grow just on bamboo, it grows on wood actually, but lingji doesn't grow in our country. The ones we have are closely related, but not the Ganoderma lucidum, which is used for production of this lingji. But now lingji is mixed, it's very mixed.
yeah, it looks around the same when you see
Yeah. That's why I remember many years ago when I went to the UK to do a course on mushrooms. So one of the tests they gave us a packet of dry mushroom soup, and with pieces of mushrooms in it, supposed to be porcinis. So porcini mushroom is a species of Boletus, and we can identify porcini by looking at the spores. The spores are characteristic shape and color. So when we look under the microscope, actually we found it's a mixture of different types of Boletus, but sold under the name porcini. Because if to just get porcinis alone, it will cost a lot. It's very expensive and hard to get. So they always bulk it up with other things. So same thing when you buy all this kopi ganola, teh gano, all kinds of stuff now. It's not pure Ganoderma lucidum. They mix with other things. Yes, bak choy, Chinese. No, bak choy I think is algae. I think found in the deserts. Yeah. Many. We have 35 species of Amanitas. Sorry? Not Phalloides. But a lot of the Amanitas we have are poisonous anyway. Most of the Amanitas, in fact, nearly all the Amanitas are poisonous because they have a poison called amanitin. So only maybe 1 or 2 species which may be edible, but even then not advisable because if you are wrong in your identification, chances of getting poisoned are very high. Yeah.
What about endemic? I mean, again with fungi, well, they spread before. Probably you can get a kind of endemic plant.
They are endemic fungi, but for Malaysia, we don't know enough to say whether it's endemic or not. I mean, the checklist also, now we have a better checklist compared to before. So very often when people publish, they say new fungus for Malaysia. Maybe newly described, but it may have been here for a long time. We don't know, because it wasn't described before. But there are some which are endemic, but we don't know enough to say whether they are endemic for Malaysia or not. Other places they do have. Like in Europe, there are many countries that have red lists of fungi. Like they have red lists for trees. We don't have that for Malaysia yet.
The fluorescent mushrooms.
Yes.
Is there a reason why
they have a pigment. What's it called? I can't remember the name of the pigment. There is a special pigment that emits light.
is there a reason for that?
Some people think that it may be a mechanism to attract some insects that disperse their spores. Luciferin, that's right. Luciferin. Yeah, luciferin.
No evidence of insects.
Not no evidence. In Malaysia, nobody studied them. There's a problem. We don't have enough people studying mushrooms or looking at mushrooms. In fact, they don't even teach mycology in the universities anymore.
What's the common mode of the sperm?
Usually wind, sometimes animals, some insects. Like the stinkhorns, they depend on flies because the spores are sticky. So the flies are attracted by the bad smell. They crawl all over the giver and then they take the spores with them. So it depends on the. And then some they depend on rain splash, like what we call the bird's nest mushroom. So when the rain drops on it, the spores will jump out and then it will stick to a tree. They coil around a leaf or something. So there are different modes of dispersal. The most common is wind. Yes. Some species you can grow, but not all. The saprophytes you can grow. Normally they feed sugar, they eat sugar. Yeah, so a lot of people who cultivate mushrooms, they use sawdust. And the sawdust may or may not be supplemented, but the sawdust by itself, when the mushroom grows on it, it breaks down the sawdust and you can get enough nutrition for
Rice husk as well.
Yeah, rice husk, rice bread, you can grow on rice bread or wheat grain. When we do studies in the labs, we grow it on agar and supplement it with sugars like sucrose or dextrose. You can grow on potato, you can grow on carrots.
I can't open the, like the sack thing that they grow the abalone mushroom, oyster mushroom.
Yeah.
There's a textile industry discards, the small pieces of cloth. They just put that in.
Cellulose.
Yeah.
Basically, they want cellulose.
Only cotton, right? Not only cotton or linen, right? Not nylon.
No, not nylon,
Yeah.
because they need cellulose. Yeah, it has to be cellulose.
I saw also like small pieces of cloth.
But the mushrooms that you can buy in the supermarket, they're almost, I'm not sure, I didn't look at it under microscope. Are there still pores in those? Or are they usually...
Spores or pores?
Spores.
Spores, yeah. Well, it depends. Like the ones which are very young, they haven't produced spores yet. But those which are old, then they will have spores.
So can I inoculate, say for example, a bag of these, say if I wanted to grow, can I buy a supermarket?
No, not usually. No, you can buy the spawn. You can buy the spawn.
Just go for mushroom cultivation.
Yeah,
Yeah, spawn.
Yeah, you buy the spawn from the cultivator.
Sometimes when you buy bird-right mushrooms, they're actually treated. They're just not just dried.
Yeah.
No, not right, the
The fresh ones.
What's the lifespan of the typical fungi?
Pickle for that.
A typical one, let's say for example, the white
Few days only.
few days.
Yeah. The termite mushroom, if you want to eat them or pick them, you should pick the buds. Once they open, they are no good because the maggots will be there already. A lot of maggots, or otherwise they're already starting to spoil.
Because they don't photosynthesize, sunlight is not really necessary.
No, we grow in the dark. Mushrooms grow best in the dark.
And at what is there a good amount of humidity that you find?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, like, you go and visit a mushroom farm, you find that once the bags are fully colonized, they will open the bags and they spray water all the time to make them fruit. Otherwise, they won't fruit. You need to spray water to make them fruit. Maybe MNS, you should organize a visit to one of these mushroom farms. It will be interesting for people who are interested.
We did go, there was one trip a few months ago by the Marine Group where they just stopped at mushroom farm what's the name, on the way to Kuala Selangor. From Sepang, there's one.
Yeah, it's a very big one there.
Big one there.
The phrase psilocybin, is that a good
Psilocybin.
yes.
This lady here is the expert in that. Dr. Chang, she can tell you more about psilocybin, the magic mushrooms. Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So is it an attribute of the mushroom or is it a group of mushrooms?
Psilocybin compounds found in this
I see. Are there any
Psychotropic effects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's magic mushrooms.
we have one or two more,
Yeah.
but they are not very common.
Okay, any more questions? Final one? Okay.
First thing we want to find out the name of the fungus. Is there some simple book that the beginner can use?
Oh yeah, I forgot. We produced these two books from here. One on fungi in Tasik Barat, and one on the fungi of Fraser's Hill. So this gives you a simple pictorial guide to some of the fungi that have been described or that you will normally see when you go to these places. But as I said earlier, just from photos alone, it's not a definitive, identification. But there isn't one for Malaysia, there are various guides that you can find in the shops, but they are just very general guides to say to the agaricus or to boletus, that kind of thing, yes, but not one specifically for Malaysia. These books can be found in the Frick bookshop. I was talking to the guy who runs the M&S bookshop downstairs. He said he'll try to get some of these copies to stock here as well.
Okay. We have the group to add small token of appreciation.
Oh, wow.